Okay, it's Jeff. Answering a question here about the question was, do you think customized machine translation works well only for content with a high amount of in-house terminology, or does it also work well with cross-organizational domain-specific terminology? Um, I've done a lot of this, right? So a lot of customization of MT engines. And one of the key things I've said, and it doesn't really matter if it's knowledge based or example based or rule based or statistical based or neural based. Now I don't, people are gonna have all the comments about the neural and statistics and say, well, does it really matter and all this stuff? It does matter, folks, because terminology is the key stuff. Okay, the noun groups are the key thing. Okay, the noun groups are the key thing. I'm gonna start here with English. I mean, there are other types of technical terms or terminology. The things that we call technical terms and marketing terms are usually noun groups, right? The noun group doesn't mean it's always just a noun, but like in English, it's a group of nouns. Well, they're actually faking as adjectives, but it's a group of nouns that kind of stack up together and make this term, right? A technical term. But the technical term would actually be adjectives combined with terms, and you can throw an adverb in if you want. I mean, it kind of just depends. I mean, the European Commission, when I was doing some stuff in my PhD work stuff, they were putting actual full sentences in, so kind of depends. But I mean, what I'm going to say is that those groups, those terms, are the key things. Now there are different types of levels of terminology. I'm not sure if I actually said in the video is that, but I'm going to say it here. So let's see how to say it. So you have, I'm going to say different types of terminology. So you have vocabulary. So you have standard basic dictionary vocabulary. Table, phone, table, chair, phone, wall, whatever. Fork, knife, get in a restaurant. That's all pretty standard vocabulary, right? Then you have what I call general specialized vocabulary, which is good enough for like journalistic information, right? Kind of newswire and journal limits. Because when I was working on several of these translation service companies, you focus on training on that stuff first, because that's kind of the stuff that most people are going to be reading, right? Any kind of general topic stuff, which is going to be specialized slightly. But that's why, like, Sistran had always said they had 21 specialized dictionaries, right? Because it's specialized, but it's general specialized, okay? So you're gonna have words like, motor and engine and that kind of stuff, a little more specific. Sometimes you get a bunch of these two-word terms and stuff. Data mining or whatever, account management. They're gonna have some things, and these are gonna kind of be in. You're gonna find them in certain domains, right? In these specialized domains. And then you have another higher level of customizing, which very customer specific vocabulary. And I'm making 3 of these. I mean, there can be more, right? It can be a little more fine tuned, but I'm just going to kind of say it here to kind of get an idea of the levels, to get a minimum levels. And then you have these customer specific ones where it's going to be very specific, like, I remember when I was at Caterpillar, we were talking about specialized vocabulary, and had they had their own special terms for antifreeze, right? And some types of joysticks for the driving and stuff, and the special glove for driving. I mean, they had a glove for, actually, that wasn't a handlebar, it wasn't a steering wheel, it was a glove, right? And that's where we're going to start getting very specific things that are only specific to that organization, that company, that institution, what do you want to call it? Now the question here is, what do you do if you're an institution and you've got different cross-organizational stuff? And the whole thing comes down to how many, I mean, the key is how big are you talking about, right? And how big is big? And how many people could potentially be doing it? So the thing here of standardization of terminologies is and who's going to be actually creating the content, and who's going to be reading the content and all that. Because you can have smaller companies that have people that are technical writers or content authors, what do you want to call these people? And they're doing this, they can have it so they're going to be, um, they'll be very proud of their terminology, be proud of what they're doing, and they want to make it enough for the readers. Now, there'll be lots of big organizations that are going to be okay, I'm going to say might. I've seen more cases where they don't when they should. Is they standardize stuff and they try to harmonize that stuff, and I've worked for organizations and stuff where we did it really well, and then others ones it's just was so hard to do because there's just so many different products and so many authors. It gets worse. I'm trying to think here. I'm trying to think of. It will also really depend. Another key thing to think here. Again, there's no one size fits all situation, but I'm trying to. You got to really analyze the situation, not say, "Hey, which is it? Is this or that?" Because it already depends on what it is you're getting into. And anybody, even the guy giving a talk and pitches the other day, and the first thing he said, "What's the first question?" He started with, "Know your audience, right? What's your audience? Because your audience is going to print anything, and then you're going to start looking at the details or the domains and stuff." Know your audience and who, right? So I'm saying here, know your audience. Who are you talking about? So if you're working for like big government, they're going to have, hundreds to thousands of people creating content. Then it's going to be a big effort, and it's going to be cross topic, cross everything, right? If you're talking about universities, it might be more general or content because people are really, what are you going to, I mean, what's the content going to be read and all that stuff and it can be sent through here. If you're going to be doing a bunch of just a bunch of course descriptions and stuff, then it'll be very specific to that specific department, but it'll be different because the course is going to be different, right? So the course is going to be different in a department, except for some of the related courses, right? But they're not all going to use the same vocab because everybody's writing their separate course descriptions, right? So kind of in the syllabi. Kind of depending here, right? Because that's the content they're going to be putting up, the syllabi, the course content, the course descriptions, and then all the theses and dissertations, which they will all be different, individual, okay? Because each person is doing the different. They're not going to be, they're all going to have their own writing styles and stuff. So you can have as much differentiation in a university as you can in other organization. Now you will. It depends if there's been any effort to try to do any standardization. If there's not, then it's going to be like whatever. If there has been, then you're going to have at least some attempt to do it. Now, another question I brought up in other videos is how many acquisitions have been there, and that seems kind of. Now, this is used about companies, right? But every time you add an acquisition to the recipe, it just adds a whole nother layer of very specific vocabulary. It's very difficult for companies that do lots of acquisitions to keep things standardized. It's really hard. And how many kind of ranges of products do you have and services? And this is, I've seen this a lot when talking about comparing, like when I worked at Caterpillar with where I work now. Caterpillar, we had 17 machine types, right? 17. Probably a few more, but 17, 20, let's say 20 machine types. Then you have all the models and stuff, but you have 20 kind of types and motor graders versus, excavators versus whatever. Okay. And that's a limited amount of things, and they're specialized in things. They only do that, right? They do mining equipment. They do motors and mining equipment stuff. That's what they do, right? But and then like an automotive company is going to be the same thing. That's what they specialize in, is automotives, right? Cars, trucks, but they're going to have a certain amount of ranges of those things and types, right? But they're going to be very specialized. Now, of course, all the seats and stuff, and the seat belts and all that stuff, and the electrical harnesses and the diagnostic equipment, it will be. That'll be cross stuff because that'll be reused. That's reusable because they're not going to make 50. They're not going to make like 50 different types of electronic devices stuff. They're going to try to reuse it when they can, right? Across different models. But when you start doing really different products, a lot of different products and a lot of different vertical industries, that's where it gets really complex. So I'd say that you really want to. I mean, before I start doing anything along these lines, I'm curious. Serious. Before I do anything along these lines, and I do decide what I'm going to do, I just look at the whole thing. I do some data mining, um, do some term extraction, kind of figure out what. And I've usually applied MT. Applied MT where in places where I've actually knew the stuff I was already specialized there, right? So I knew it really well, and I knew what our level of standardization was, so I was able to apply it really fast. But if you're coming in with no idea, or if you're doing translation for people you have no idea, this is like afterthought translation. This is tough, but it can be done. It's just you got to do this pretty intelligently, and you just got to do some. You got to have some data mining stuff. Okay, have some data term extraction stuff. Figure out figure out how many different term types you got. Okay, figure out what your tokens are. Okay, I mean, if you don't know what a token is, go look it up. I mean, it's basically all your terms, right? And individual terms, how many words do you have that are different than your well, types and tokens. Okay, I mean, so you got to figure what your types are, and then what's your frequency of your tokens on that. Okay, do a bit of that, figure it out, do a little bit of that. Yeah, it takes some time. It takes a little bit of time to do it, but that's going to help figure out what you do if you're not sure, right? And depending on your variation and with the frequencies on your variation of your types, your word types, right? This will determine where you need to specialize, and you can see really quickly. And some of the tools now are a little bit better. They're not just looking for single word stuff. They can do multiple words and figure out what the technical terms are and all that are multi-word terms. That'll give you a good idea. And if you got a real, if you got I mean, it all comes down to how the frequencies, right? And how many entries you need to make. And I've written a lot of papers on this about how I did it and how I optimized it. And I don't want to go over that again, but look at the things that I did, and I explained in my 2006 paper on dictionary building. It's up on Translators Cafe. It's up on my list of publications, right? That one's a pretty good idea of figuring out figuring out what your range of potential is, and then determining how many terms you're going to have to create, how many terms you have, and then how many entries you have to make, and then empty dictionary to be able to. And that was a rule-based system, but it really doesn't matter because in the end, if you're not pumping some linguistic information into it with terms, vocabularies, and management, then you're making a machine guess at all this stuff, right? And it's not going to have with not enough data, right? So whatever you can get it's always better to have it. And I don't care what others say. We got to do this with all this stuff, types of this. Come on. I mean, this is it comes down to we're managing words, and words have meaning, and some words have the same meaning in the same paragraph. Right? Issue has different meanings, right? So you can have an issue, a problem, and you can have an issue of a magazine, and you can have it in the same paragraph, right? So you have two different meanings in the same paragraph. Volume can have different meanings. Volume of water, volume of sound. They can have different meanings. Okay, so in the same paragraphs. So you kind of want to be able to. It's sometimes be qualified. You want to figure out what are the qualified terms, or the qualified, and whether there's qualified adjectives before them, all that. You want to do you got to do the word mining, right? There are tools to do this. There are tools to do this out there. So pass it through, throw it through, figure it out. The biggest problem I've seen is that people don't get, when you're doing special translation service, they're not giving you the vocabulary of everything you would have to start with. So you're kind of going as you. I remember walking down. I remember when I was selling to companies. I can't say the names of these things. I don't want to say the names. It's been too, even though I'm out of that. The cycle. I mean, I don't want to say that. So I remember going down and wearing a suit every day, and going down to the companies and trying to get the deals across different departments. Spend my time in hallways and stuff, and they all said they had TMs, but they didn't. I mean, they didn't. In the end, I started all over again because they all say they got it, but you can never find it because people can't know where it is, and it's just they don't know where it is and stuff. So in the end, finding the corporate is a hard thing to do, and collect in the corpora. And really, when you got to organize and you got to get it so you can get all the stuff about a website translation project can be like 30 languages and it really can be in a certain domain and stuff. Finding that content and stuff. So get as much as you can. And this is a hard thing to do in the translation services field. It's really hard to do because people don't give it to you because they don't always have it. So, they say they get it, but don't always have it. They might have it for the website, but they're not going to give it for all the other content. They're possibly in the other departments, right? And they're not going to sit there and want to give you other stuff. So it's really tough to do this sometimes. So I'd say is get as much as you can. If you need to be able to figure out what is by all the website stuff, do it. Don't use the content for other than that. Just get an idea of the extraction. Don't use it for anything else. You get yourself in trouble, right? But at least get an idea of what this spread is. What's the coverage? And what are how much variation got to these things? Then go from there. And again, it all comes down to is how many people you got doing the content, what types of people are they doing individual content items or not? Are they doing collaborative work? They were like the European Commission had a lot of collaborative work on content, right? So they had guidelines. Do they have guidelines? Do they have guidelines or not? That's going to tell you how they do it, right? Ask for the guidelines and how implemented they are. If the guidelines are a piece of paper, document, that may be one thing. If it's actually a system, then you're going to know people are going to be using it a lot more, right? So a lot of the things I think are kind of key to be able to figure out how you want to do it. I will always create a customized terminology thing. It's just I might do it differently. I don't apply the same way every single time. I might not do this many number of entries in certain types of terms, but I always want what the frequency is. If you got a lot of terms, they'll have one frequency or 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5. Forget it, right? Because you're gonna spend more time creating the entry, and then they're gonna be actually fixing it. So, but if you got a significant amount of frequency of the frequent list on these tokens that are coming out in the types, and you got a lot of repetition and frequency occurrence, then you want to do it, right? That's where it's going to be the high benefit. Because in the end, you don't want to fix it. You don't want to correct it. You don't want to correct it. Correcting it is just what time's taking. You want to do as much as you can up front. But again, you can't do any of these frequency lists or any of kind of content overlapping, authoring memory, or whatever you want to call it. You can't be able to do that and you don't have the content, right? Unless you know it and you've spent years writing it for them stuff and you've done it. And that has been the case when I was at MyCom. I wrote probably 90% of the content of the company before I had trained others to do it. So, and I'd been involved in a lot of the different departments. So I knew everything by heart, and I knew when I was writing I wrote a few papers at a few conferences about what we did at MyCom. I knew it very well, right? So I really could. I'd done a lot of the RFIs, the RFPs, the everything, the content, the technical writing, the help documentation, the everything, the support documentation, everything from end to end. So I knew it, but that's not going to always be the case, right? Of everybody. So sometimes you're going to be walking in, you're not going to have that background, and you're going to be guessing at stuff, right? So that's what's coming up with this question, I'm pretty sure. And so if you're providing a service for someone else, and that's usually what these questions are. How do we do it if I don't know, right? So try that out, see if it works. Hopefully it gives at least some advice. It's not, it just depends. And I will always do some amount of investigation before I kind of get into this thing, because I want to know how much work it's going to be. Terminology, doing terminology, customization, all that is work, and you don't get paid for it. A lot of people don't get paid for it because they don't know how to get people to pay them for it. I used to make sure we get paid for it, but so we'd make money off it. But a lot of people don't, so you don't want to spend time have to create a bunch of entries if unless you have to. So, but I would do it anyways. It's just you got to figure out how much it's going to cost, right, and what your internal cost on that thing. So there's that. Hope it helps, right?